Hey guys, welcome back. SketchyGOichie. I'm your host, Roger Andrews. I say I'm your host in that I'm trying to guide you through these little sketches, these little Procreate demos that I'm throwing up on the YouTube, and I want to kind of be your tour guide for my process and how I work on these particular renderings. I'm loving sharing this stuff on YouTube. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm hoping to build up an interaction. You guys are obviously welcome to share your comments below right here in YouTube. You certainly can email me at sketchygoichie@gmail.com. And I've also put together a Facebook group or page that you can like. It's also called SketchyGOichie, no surprise. And feel free to post comments there, place your artwork up there. We can do a little interaction. We can do some critiques and some sharing of some tips and tricks. I can do it in real time, well, as close to real time as you can get on Facebook. And of course, I'm on Instagram as well. That is Rand247, RAND247. So if you want to see some more artwork, and I post some alerts to the videos that are coming on those socials, feel free. So let's get right into this image of our buddy Edward's ScissorHands. I was inspired to do this one based off of a series of how best to describe them. There's sort of like, pop culture icons studies. By studies, I mean I was really trying to get a feel for Procreate, which is the app I'm rendering in, on the iPad with the Apple Pencil. I was really trying to get a grasp and a handle on using the proper tools. By tools, I mean brushes and get the settings and how best to render render digitally, because I've spent my entire life working more traditionally, pen and ink and pencil and marker and a little bit of paint. So for this, I really wanted to find a good piece of reference, place it into Procreate on its own layer, gray it back. By gray it back, I mean sort of lower the opacity, and then a layer on top. I selected, I believe at that time I was using the technical pencil, and with a really full opacity and full out intensity on that pencil tool, I'm kind of able to kind of create this sort of ink looking effect. In later times I've kind of converted over to the technical pen in the inking brush set in Procreate, and that's what I'm using on some of the more recent videos. This is probably a little over a year ago that I rendered this in Procreate. So technique-wise, it just rendering hair. I know everyone. It's not easy. I've mentioned it in several videos, especially the ones that are these portraits. It's all about capturing flow, and it's capturing the organic quality of the hair. It can't be too rigid. It can't be all straight lines and precise curves. It's got to be irregular. The lines have to be thicks and thins, and they got to be broken up by other lines, and hair has to cross over other hairs. It's kind of what you can see at the top of his head, where the hair sort of it has the illusion of strands that are crossing over other strands. And his hair is particularly wild, so it's and there's lots of sort of, as you can see here, like thinner strokes and thinner strokes, and you can see even when I'm rendering his face, it's a varying of the line weight. That's the key crucial element when you're inking something, particularly if you're inking something that is organic. And you'll notice even here, as I'm getting starting to move down to the body of the image, it's all about filling in the blacks and filling in the shapes and essentially doing my best to do an approximation of what leather would look like, or vinyl, whatever that actual material Tim Burton was inspired to use in creating that Edward Scissorhands costume. And of course, I mentioned this in previous videos, capturing that Johnny Depp as Edward Scissorhands was essential, crucial part of it. But for me, hitting the details in here, as you can see me kind of rendering the scissor, his hands, and clearly you can tell that I've kind of manipulated the photo. There's a couple of 3 different reference images, 2 or 3 different reference images that I used to put this together. And the process for that is super simple. It's just literally cutting and manipulating the photo and then joining it together on one layer, and then lowering the opacity. And as I mentioned earlier, just add your drawing layer right on top of that. Create a new layer right on top and just start rendering. You can always lower the opacity if you feel like it's a little too intense and you can't really see the line art on the top layer. Very simple and easy to do. And in reality is, whenever I'm rendering these things, the focus I would suggest for you should be capturing that facial likeness, and then the detailing beyond that is completely up to you. There's been renderings that I've had done in the past where essentially the face is really the essential element, face and hair maybe, and then everything else kind of falls away, almost fades away in level of importance. And in terms of level of importance, I had the time. This was done for fun. This wasn't a client project, and so I really could kind of dial in on the details of his costume. And as you can see here, I'm really somewhat painstakingly going in and trying to capture all the buckles and the little hinges and again the leather and vinyl, the texture of that, the shininess of that, and it's I generally prefer, at least my own personal style, I prefer to work simply, to render somewhat cartoony. I think it's maybe it's because I've been rendering for so long, this sort of, it's what I call an economy of line. I like to capture the image in the minimum amount of lines possible. However, I do understand that, for some people's styles, they really enjoy noodling and drawing and sketching and capturing every single minute detail, every strand of hair, every eyelash, every, like in the case here, every buckle and every shine or reflection in the leather. Not necessarily my bag. I was really kind of challenging myself, which again is another element I would highly encourage you guys to do. Challenging myself to, of course, capture the look of Johnny Depp, and A, number one concern, and B, concern B was to basically hit every single little detail that I could in this drawing. And I think it almost has to be done for Edward Scissorhands. He's such a detailed character, and there's so much going on in his costume. I think it was, part of the exercise to capture all of that. And so when it, obviously, do whatever you're inspired to do. If you're inspired to work, ultra simply, no line art, just a series of colored shapes, do that. If you're inspired to render every single nook and cranny and detail, do that. It's why, I sign off every single one of these videos with live your moment. It's really what I mean by that. It's whenever you're in the middle of a render, and if you're not enjoying it, I say pull the ripcord. Literally get out of it, because it's you really have to. That's particularly for something like this where it's not client work, it's done for fun. If I wasn't enjoying getting in there and really, hammering at the little hinges in his in his costume and in his that sort of scissor apparatus that he's using for hands, if I wasn't enjoying it in the moment, I would definitely bail out and work on something else. It's particularly if you guys are rendering for fun. If it's not professional work, there's really no reason why you can't start something, and then fire up on something new, or really challenge yourself to push through and take this to completion. Speaking of completion, in terms of time it took me to do this, is probably one of my longer renders. I got, at this point, I had been doing these for probably like 6 months or so. And so I got to a point where I really was nailing the facial likeness pretty quickly. And I was sort of, I was kind of taking liberties with what I wanted to do with the pose. And I was knocking them out, depending on the character, depending on the person. I was knocking them out in probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. This one clearly took much longer than that. If I had to guess, I probably put about 3.5, maybe even 4 hours into this one, which, I'll be honest with you, anyone who's worked with me in person knows that that's a lot. I can accomplish a lot of render in a fairly limited amount of time. It's just probably part of that is because my style is pretty simple in terms of, particularly when it comes to concept design and character design. It's pretty simple, particularly when I'm doing original characters, or I'm doing versions of licensed characters. It's a pretty, it's not autopilot for me. Obviously there's a lot of thought that goes to it, but it's a freer, quicker process for me. I can get to the ideas quicker, particularly when I'm generating images from scratch. Whereas in this case, I'm working from a photo of an existing property of a character that is highly recognizable. It was important for me to kind of really get in there and kind of capture all those little doodads and things. So I say all of that to say that do what you do, enjoy what you do. It's, otherwise, I know there's tons of hours of Netflix that can be watched. So, speaking of which, again, so inspiration to post this as a video was my daughter, my 4-year-old and middle daughter, the 16-year-old, were together on a couch watching Edward ScissorHands the other day, and I was like, you know what? Let me dig this one out of storage and make a video out of it. And so, as I mentioned in the intro, please do feel free to share your images. Draw your own Edward ScissorHands. Post it on my Facebook group, the sketchyGOichie Facebook group, and it'd be fun to kind of have an interaction in that fashion. I may down the road, and I really would like to do what some of the other artists are doing on YouTube and open it up to people who are watching these and fellow artists to share their images, and maybe I can create posts and videos highlighting their images, and maybe we can, it doesn't have to be critical, but it can certainly be, there's definitely some advice that I could share, particularly with young artists, and particularly with artists who are struggling with a certain facet of their, oh, that's my alarm, that's telling me you are definitely almost done with this image. Sorry about that. So closing, final touches. As you can see, I've pretty much rendered all the different elements of this. Spotting some random sort of like shapes in the background. I'm trying to decide if I want to go dark with the background, but obviously he's so dark. For contrast's sake, I chose to kind of just give some sort of scratchy sort of pencil texture behind him in sort of a medium level. It's black, but it's kind of a medium level of opacity. And that is that for Edward ScissorHands. So hopefully you dug it. Please, again, feel free to subscribe, share, do all that stuff. SketchyGOichie. Happy sketching, y'all. Again, live your moment. Peace out.